The world rarely notices the person cleaning the last window, but sometimes the right pair of eyes changes everything. By the time the sun began sinking behind the Manhattan skyline, my arms felt like they no longer belonged to me. Glass cleaner clung to my fingertips despite 3 hand washings. My shoulders burned from lifting extension poles all day, and every step reminded me that I had been standing for nearly 11 hours without a real break. The office tower shimmered with reflected orange light as hundreds of employees hurried toward elevators, briefcases in hand, eager to begin their evenings. I still had one window left. Just one. I tightened my faded work gloves and climbed the short maintenance platform beside the building's front entrance. The final pane stretched from the sidewalk almost to the second floor, catching every fingerprint, every streak of rain, every reflection of the busy street beyond. It deserved the same care as the first window I had cleaned that morning. That was how I worked. If my name was attached to something, I wanted it done right, even if no one ever knew who I was. My phone vibrated inside my jacket pocket. I already knew it was my 7-year-old son, Noah. He always called around this time to ask the same question. "Mom, are you coming home soon?" I smiled before answering. "Just one more window, sweetheart. Then I am all yours." "I will wait by the window," he promised. "Do not skip dinner again." My heart squeezed. "I will not." We hung up, and I tucked the phone away before reaching for my squeegee again. A burst of laughter echoed behind me. 3 young professionals in expensive coats stood near the revolving doors holding coffee cups, watching me work instead of heading home. One of them nudged another with his elbow. "Imagine spending your whole life cleaning other people's fingerprints." Another laughed. "That window probably makes more money than she does." They were not shouting. They were not trying to hurt me. Somehow that made it sting even more. I kept moving the squeegee from left to right, pretending not to hear them. My mother used to tell me that dignity was something nobody could take unless I handed it away myself. I repeated those words silently every time life became heavier than my paycheck. I finished another careful stroke across the glass and reached for my cloth to polish the edges. Behind the spotless reflection, I caught sight of a man standing inside the executive lobby. He had been there long enough that everyone around him seemed to move differently. Employees instinctively stepped aside as he walked. Men in tailored suits waited quietly without interrupting him. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal overcoat over a crisp white shirt, he carried himself with effortless authority. Dark hair framed a face that revealed almost nothing, while intricate tattoos disappeared beneath his collar whenever he turned his head. His gray eyes were fixed on the window. No, they were fixed on me. For one brief moment, the noise around us seemed to disappear. The laughter behind me faded into the distance. The revolving doors slowed. Even the traffic outside felt strangely quiet. He was not watching because I had made a mistake. He was watching because he had seen something no one else had bothered to notice. I was not rushing. I was not cutting corners. I was cleaning the very last window with the same care I had given the first one, even while strangers mocked me for doing the only honest work I had left. His expression changed almost imperceptibly, as though something inside him had come to a complete stop. Everyone else saw a tired cleaning woman finishing another shift. The man behind the glass looked at me as though he had just discovered something far more valuable than the building itself. The last streak of sunlight disappeared from the glass just as I folded the worn microfiber cloth into my cleaning bucket. My reflection stared back at me for a brief second. Windblown blonde hair escaping from my ponytail. Faded blue uniform with bleach stains that never completely washed away. Tired eyes that looked older than 29 should have. I smiled anyway. The window was spotless. That mattered. The laughter behind me slowly faded as the 3 office workers wandered toward the parking garage, already forgetting I existed. I had learned long ago that people who looked down on honest work rarely remembered the faces of the people doing it. I climbed carefully off the maintenance platform and began packing my supplies into the back of the aging company van. Every movement reminded me how exhausted I was, but one thought kept me moving. Noah was waiting by the apartment window, just like he always did. Every evening, he counted the buses until mine finally stopped outside our building. It had become our little tradition after his father walked out 3 years earlier. I checked my phone. One new voicemail. I pressed play while closing the van doors. "Hi, Hannah," my supervisor said. "The Riverside office wants someone tomorrow morning before sunrise." I know you already worked overtime today, but the extra hours are yours if you want them. I closed my eyes for a moment. Extra hours meant groceries. Extra hours meant Noah could keep taking piano lessons another month. I will be there, I whispered before returning the call. Inside the executive lobby above me, Vincent Romano remained standing beside the floor-to-ceiling windows long after the board meeting had officially ended. One executive continued discussing quarterly numbers, while another waited for approval on several contracts. Vincent heard none of it. His attention stayed fixed on the woman loading cleaning supplies into an old white van. "Sir?" one executive finally asked. "Should we continue?" Vincent looked away from the window for the first time. "Who cleans this building?" The room fell unexpectedly quiet. Several executives exchanged confused glances before the property manager answered. "Outside contractor, I believe." Vincent nodded once. "Find out her name." "Is there a problem with the cleaning?" "No." His voice remained calm. "There is a problem with the way people looked at someone who earned every dollar she took home today." No one spoke after that. They simply wrote down the instruction and moved to the next agenda item, while Vincent silently returned to the window. Down on the sidewalk, I never noticed the conversation taking place several floors above me. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine on the second try, and headed toward the small grocery store where discounted bread was marked down every evening after 7. I carried exactly $36 in my wallet until payday. Every purchase mattered. I picked up a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, pasta, apples, and Noah's favorite tomato soup. At the register, I quietly returned the package of cookies to the shelf after realizing I had miscalculated by $3.40. The cashier smiled apologetically. "I am sorry." I smiled back. "It is all right. Maybe next week." 20 minutes later, I unlocked my apartment door. Before I could even set the grocery bags down, Noah ran across the living room and hugged me so tightly that my exhaustion disappeared for a moment. "You came," he said with complete certainty, as though there had never been any doubt. "I always come home," I whispered, kissing the top of his head. While he carried groceries into the tiny kitchen, I glanced toward our apartment window. Across the city, countless office lights still glowed against the evening sky. Somewhere behind one of those windows, a man I had never met was quietly wondering why a woman with almost nothing still treated the very last window of the day as though it deserved her very best. The alarm rang at 4:30 the next morning, long before the first hint of daylight reached our apartment window. I slipped quietly out of bed, careful not to wake Noah, and brewed the cheapest coffee I could find on sale the week before. The tiny kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and laundry detergent, while I packed a peanut butter sandwich in a Noah's lunchbox and left a handwritten note beside his cereal bowl. "See you after school. Love you more than yesterday." I smiled as I folded the note because that was another promise I never wanted to break. By 5:30, I was already standing outside the Riverside Financial Center with a bucket in one hand and an extension pole balanced across my shoulder. The glass tower reflected the pale blue colors of early morning, still untouched by the crowds that would soon rush through its revolving doors. Cleaning before sunrise had one unexpected advantage. The city felt honest before. People filled it with noise. Every window reflected only the sky. My supervisor handed me a clipboard as I climbed onto the exterior platform. "The executive floors requested extra attention today," he said. "Important visitors." I nodded. "Every window gets the same attention." He chuckled quietly. "That is why clients keep asking for you." Those words stayed with me as I worked my way across the building. One window at a time. One careful movement after another. No shortcuts. No rushing. Just the quiet satisfaction of watching dirty glass become clear again. Around 8 o'clock, black luxury vehicles rolled silently toward the front entrance below. Men in dark tailored suits stepped out first before one familiar figure emerged from the center vehicle. Vincent Romano adjusted the cuff of his charcoal coat and looked up almost instinctively toward the upper floors. He spotted the maintenance platform before anyone else did. Hannah was already halfway across another row of windows, moving with the same steady precision he had watched the evening before. One of the executives walking beside him noticed where Vincent's attention had settled. "Sir, we prepared the quarterly reports exactly as requested." Vincent continued watching the woman suspended several stories above the sidewalk. "Did you find out her name?" "Hannah Brooks. 29. Single mother. Works 2 cleaning jobs." Vincent remained silent for several moments. Anything else? No complaints from any client. Perfect attendance. Excellent evaluations. Vincent nodded once. That tells me more than a background report ever could. He entered the building, but before the revolving doors closed behind him, he looked back toward the windows one final time. High above the street, I never noticed him. My focus remained on the streak of dust caught along the edge of one narrow frame. While I polished the corner carefully, another cleaner working farther down the platform laughed good-naturedly. Hannah, nobody would notice if you skipped that little spot. I smiled without stopping. I would. The older man shook his head with an amused grin. You always make every window look like the first one of the day, because somebody will be the last person to look through it tonight. He laughed softly and returned to his own section. Several floors below, Vincent had just stepped into the executive elevator when the property manager quietly repeated Hannah's words after hearing them through the open service radio. Vincent did not answer immediately. Instead, he watched the elevator doors slowly close and caught his own reflection in the polished steel. For years, people had respected him because of his power. That morning, he found himself respecting someone because she believed the very last window deserved the same care as the first, even when she thought nobody was watching. By the time my shift ended that afternoon, every floor of the Riverside Financial Center reflected the sky like polished blue mirrors. My back ached from hours on the maintenance platform, but there was a quiet satisfaction that came from leaving something better than I had found it. I loaded the last bucket into the company van, signed my time sheet, and started walking toward the little coffee shop across the street. I had exactly 20 minutes before catching the bus to pick Noah up from his after-school program. A small cup of coffee was the only luxury I allowed myself on long workdays. The cafe was nearly empty except for a few office workers typing on laptops and a young couple sharing a late breakfast. I ordered the smallest black coffee on the menu and quietly counted the bills in my wallet before paying. As I turned to leave, someone stepped aside to hold the door open. After you, a familiar voice said. I looked up in surprise. Vincent Romano stood there wearing a dark navy overcoat over a crisp white shirt, his sleeves rolled back just enough for the intricate tattoos near his wrists to catch the afternoon light. Without the crowd of executives surrounding him, he somehow seemed less intimidating, though the quiet confidence around him remained impossible to ignore. Thank you, I said politely. He smiled. May I buy you another cup? I immediately shook my head. This one is enough. Instead of insisting, he simply nodded. Then perhaps you would allow me to sit for 5 minutes while you enjoy the one you already paid for. The request caught me off guard. It did not feel like charity. It felt like respect. I glanced at the clock above the counter. 5 minutes. We found a small table near the window overlooking the busy street. Neither of us spoke at first. Outside, people hurried through crosswalks without noticing the changing leaves drifting across the sidewalk. Finally, Vincent broke the silence. I wanted to thank you. I frowned slightly. For what? For reminding me that excellence is not measured by who is watching. I laughed softly, certain he was joking. I only clean windows. He looked directly into my eyes. No. You restore the view people take for granted every single day. No one had ever described my work that way before. I looked down at my coffee, suddenly unsure what to say. Vincent continued quietly. Yesterday I watched 3 people laugh while you finished the last window of the day. You never looked at them once. I smiled faintly. Looking back would not have made the window cleaner. For the first time since we met, Vincent laughed openly. The sound was warm, genuine, and surprisingly ordinary. It erased the invisible distance that power usually created between people. I have attended meetings with heads of corporations all morning, he admitted. Yet that may be the wisest sentence I have heard today. Heat crept into my cheeks. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated. Noah's smiling face appeared on the screen. I have to go, I said, already standing. My son is waiting. Vincent rose immediately without trying to keep me there. Children should never have to wait longer than necessary. I slipped my phone into my pocket and smiled. Thank you for understanding. As I hurried toward the door, Vincent spoke one final sentence that stopped me just long enough to look back. Hannah, never let anyone convince you that honest work makes you ordinary. I carried those words with me all the way to the bus stop, never realizing they would quietly become the first brick in rebuilding a confidence I had almost forgotten I possessed. The conversation over coffee stayed with me far longer than I expected. Every time I picked up my squeegee or climbed another maintenance platform, I found myself remembering Vincent's words. Honest work makes the world clearer. Nobody had ever spoken about my job with that kind of respect before. Most people noticed clean windows only when they were dirty again. Vincent had somehow noticed the person holding the cloth. Life, however, continued moving at its usual pace. Bills still arrived every Friday. Noah still needed new sneakers after outgrowing his old pair. My alarm still rang before sunrise, and my second job still waited after the first one ended. Hard work did not disappear simply because someone finally appreciated it. A week later, our cleaning company gathered in the warehouse for an unexpected staff meeting. Everyone looked confused. Extra meetings usually meant budget cuts or schedule changes. Our owner, Mr. Dalton, stood near the loading dock holding several folders while smiling wider than anyone had seen in years. "I have some good news," he announced. "We were just awarded a long-term maintenance contract for 3 additional commercial towers downtown." The room filled with surprised whispers. He continued, "Because of that, every full-time employee will receive additional hours, updated equipment, and better hourly pay beginning next month." For a second, I wondered if I had heard him correctly. Better pay meant fewer overnight shifts at my second job. Better pay meant dinner with Noah more often instead of leaving frozen meals in the refrigerator. Around me, co-workers exchanged relieved smiles. One older cleaner quietly wiped tears from his eyes before pretending he had something in them. Mr. Dalton laughed softly. "You all earned this." The client specifically praised the consistency of our team's work. My heart warmed at the thought that someone had finally noticed the effort every cleaner poured into invisible work. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the elementary school to pick up Noah. He came running across the playground carrying a folded piece of construction paper decorated with colorful stars. "Look what I made," he said proudly as we walked home together. It was another drawing. This time, he had sketched a tall glass building with sunlight shining across every window. A tiny woman stood beside it holding a cleaning pole. Above her, he had written in careful second-grade handwriting, "My mom makes the world brighter." I laughed through unexpected tears. "Where did you get that idea?" Noah shrugged. "Because people can see better after you finish working." His answer sounded so familiar that I stopped walking for a moment. Vincent had said almost the same thing in the coffee shop. I folded the drawing carefully and slipped it into my bag. The following evening, I arrived at the Riverside Financial Center for another shift. As I prepared my equipment near the service entrance, I noticed several new safety harnesses stacked neatly inside unopened boxes. The old frayed ropes we had been using for years had disappeared. My supervisor handed me one of the new harnesses with a satisfied grin. The client insisted every cleaner receive upgraded equipment before the new contract begins. I ran my hand across the sturdy straps, amazed by how much safer they felt. "That must have been expensive," I said quietly. He shrugged. "Whoever approved the contract said quality work deserves quality tools." High above the city, Vincent stood beside the executive conference room window watching our crew prepare for another evening's work. One of his senior advisors approached with several documents waiting for his signature. "The contract has been finalized exactly as requested," the advisor said. Vincent signed the final page without taking credit for any of it. "Good," he replied calmly. "If people spend their lives helping others see clearly, the least we can do is make sure they are seen too." The new safety harness felt different the moment I fastened it across my shoulders. It was lighter, stronger, and somehow carried a quiet message that someone believed my life was worth protecting. I ran my hand across the reinforced straps before climbing onto the maintenance platform for another evening shift. The city glowed beneath the fading sunset while office lights slowly illuminated floor after floor above me. Every window reflected another story. Every building held another life I would probably never know. Yet for the first time in years, I no longer felt invisible inside my own. A few days later, Mr. Dalton called me into his office after work. I worried I had made a mistake somewhere on the latest inspection. Instead, he slid a folder across the desk with an encouraging smile. "One of our downtown clients requested that we recommend someone for a new quality supervisor position. Better pay, better hours, less physical strain. I immediately thought of you." I stared at the folder in disbelief. "Me?" He nodded. "Your work is consistent. You never cut corners. More importantly, the people around you trust you." I looked down at the application. I have never supervised anyone before. Everyone starts somewhere, he replied. The only thing I cannot teach is character. You already have that. I carried the folder home that evening without opening it. Noah noticed it immediately while helping me unpack groceries. Is that homework? He asked. I laughed softly. Maybe. He tilted his head. Then you will do great. You always help me with mine. Children had a remarkable way of making impossible things sound simple. The following Saturday, Vincent invited Noah and me to a neighborhood community fair supporting local small businesses and tradespeople. It was held in a city park filled with food stands, handmade crafts, and families enjoying the warm autumn afternoon. There were no luxury cars parked beside the entrance, no grand announcements, and no attention focused on Vincent despite several people greeting him with quiet respect as they passed. He wore a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing the intricate tattoos I had only glimpsed before, dark jeans, and comfortable boots. Without the formal suits, he looked less like an untouchable businessman and more like someone grateful to spend an ordinary afternoon outside. Noah immediately pulled him toward a woodworking booth where children were building small wooden picture frames. Can we make one together? He asked hopefully. Vincent smiled. Only if your mother helps too. We spent nearly an hour sanding wood, choosing paint colors, and laughing whenever Noah accidentally covered more of his own hands than the frame. Watching Vincent patiently guide my son without ever taking over reminded me of something I had slowly begun to understand. Real strength never rushed ahead of someone. It simply stayed close enough to help when needed. As the afternoon drew to a close, we sat beneath a large maple tree sharing hot chocolate, while Noah proudly held up the finished picture frame. This one needs a family picture, he declared. Vincent looked toward me instead of answering. There was no pressure in his eyes, only quiet hope. I smiled without realizing it. I think that is a wonderful idea. Noah grinned so widely that people walking past could not help smiling back at him. As we stood to leave, I slipped slightly on a blanket folded across the grass. Vincent instinctively reached for my hand, steadying me for only a second before letting go the moment I found my balance. Instead of stepping away this time, I gently closed the small distance between us again and let my fingers remain intertwined with his. Neither of us spoke. We simply continued walking beside Noah beneath the golden leaves, and somehow that ordinary silence felt more meaningful than any promise either of us could have made. The application folder stayed unopened on my kitchen table for 2 full days. Every time I walked past it, I told myself I would fill it out after dinner, after Noah finished his homework, after one more load of laundry, after tomorrow. Deep down, I was not afraid of the paperwork. I was afraid of believing I deserved something better. Noah noticed before anyone else. On Tuesday evening, he looked from the folder to me while coloring dinosaurs at the kitchen table. Mom, he asked quietly, why are you pretending not to see it? I laughed because children always ask the questions adults spent months avoiding. Maybe I am nervous. He nodded thoughtfully. I was nervous before my piano recital too. What helped? He smiled. You sat in the front row. His answer settled gently in my heart. That night, after he fell asleep, I finally opened the folder and completed every page. I signed my name with steady hands. For the first time in years. 3 days later, I received the promotion. My new position meant supervising quality inspections instead of spending every shift climbing platforms. It also meant evenings at home more often, weekends with Noah, and enough extra income that I could finally stop worrying every time the refrigerator looked too empty. When I called Noah from outside the office, he answered after the first ring. Did you get it? I laughed through happy tears. I did. His excited cheer echoed so loudly through the phone that several people passing on the sidewalk smiled without knowing why. That Saturday, I invited Vincent and Noah to the small neighborhood diner where we usually celebrated special occasions. It was nothing fancy. Red vinyl booths, warm apple pie behind the counter, and waitresses who remembered everyone's favorite breakfast. Vincent arrived wearing a navy sweater instead of one of his tailored suits. Without the formal clothing and quiet entourage that usually surrounded him, he blended almost perfectly into the ordinary Saturday crowd. Almost. People still seemed to make room for him without realizing they were doing it. Noah proudly handed Vincent the wooden picture frame they had built together at the community fair. Inside it, He had placed a photograph Mrs. Henderson secretly took of the three of us laughing beneath the maple tree. Now it has the right picture, Noah said. Vincent studied the frame for a long moment before looking at me. This may be the most valuable gift I have ever received. After breakfast, we walked slowly through the neighborhood park, where children played soccer beneath bright autumn leaves. I told Vincent about the promotion, expecting him to congratulate me politely. Instead, he stopped walking altogether. I never doubted you would earn it, he said. I doubted whether you believed you deserved it. I looked down at the gravel path beneath our feet. I am still learning. So am I. We continued walking until Noah ran ahead to watch ducks gliding across the small pond. For a few quiet moments, the park seemed to belong only to us. Vincent turned toward me with the same calm expression he had carried since the day we met. Hannah, for most of my life, people admired my success before they knew my character. You were the first person who never cared about either. You simply kept cleaning windows. I smiled softly. Someone had to. He laughed, shaking his head. And somehow you ended up cleaning more than glass. A cool breeze carried yellow leaves across the path between us. Without speaking, I reached for his hand again. This time, neither of us questioned the simple gesture. We stood there watching Noah laugh beside the pond, both quietly realizing that the strongest foundations are not built in dramatic moments. They are built one ordinary day at a time until they become something neither person wants to imagine living without. Monday morning brought my first day as a quality supervisor, and I arrived at the Riverside Financial Center almost an hour early. Old habits were difficult to break. I still carried a microfiber cloth in my bag, even though inspecting windows required more observation than cleaning. As I walked through the lobby, I caught my reflection in the same glass panels I had spent countless mornings polishing. For the first time, I was looking through them instead of wiping them clean. The difference felt strangely emotional. Several members of my former cleaning crew smiled as I greeted them one by one. Nothing about my promotion changed the way I saw them because I knew exactly how much effort disappeared behind every spotless window. During the first inspection of the day, I noticed one young employee quietly redoing the corner of a window after everyone else had already moved on. He reminded me of myself only a few months earlier. "You missed break," I said gently. His face flushed with embarrassment. "I wanted to finish this one correctly." I smiled. "Then finish it correctly. But afterward, take your break. Good work should never require forgetting you are human." He nodded with obvious relief. As I continued through the building, several executives passed without recognizing that I had once been the woman cleaning the same hallways before sunrise. Oddly enough, I did not mind. My value had never depended on whether anyone remembered my name. Around noon, the property manager invited me to a meeting with the building's ownership group to review the first inspection reports under the new contract. When I entered the conference room, I stopped for a brief moment. Vincent was already there, seated near the windows overlooking the city. He looked up, and the quiet smile that crossed his face immediately made the unfamiliar room feel less intimidating. The meeting unfolded smoothly. I presented maintenance notes, explained areas needing additional attention, and suggested practical improvements for equipment storage and scheduling. No one interrupted. No one dismissed my ideas. When the discussion ended, one senior executive closed his folder and looked directly at me. "Your recommendations will save time and improve quality across every property we manage. Excellent work, Miss Brooks." I thanked him calmly, surprised by how natural confidence had begun to feel. As everyone prepared to leave, Vincent remained behind. He walked beside me toward the elevator without saying anything at first. Finally, he glanced toward the sparkling skyline beyond the glass. "Do you remember the last window?" he asked quietly. I laughed. How could I forget? He looked at me with the same steady gray eyes that had first noticed me months before. Everyone else saw someone being mocked. I saw someone who refused to lower her standards because other people lowered theirs. His words settled gently into the silence between us. I rested one hand against the polished window beside the elevator and smiled at our reflections. I thought I was cleaning glass that day. Vincent shook his head softly. "You were teaching everyone who bothered to look." When we reached the lobby, Noah came running through the revolving doors with Mrs. Henderson after school, carrying another drawing folded carefully beneath his arm. He hugged me first before proudly opening the picture. This time he had drawn the three of us standing in front of a building filled with bright windows. Above it he had written in careful block letters, "People shine brighter when someone believes in them." I felt tears warm my eyes before I could stop them. Vincent knelt beside Noah, smiling with unmistakable pride. I looked from my son to the man quietly standing beside us and realized something extraordinary had happened. The last window I cleaned had never been made of glass at all. It had been the one through which I finally learned to see myself. 1 year later, the riverside skyline looked exactly the same, yet my life had become almost unrecognizable. Every morning I still paused beside the lobby windows before beginning work, but now I inspected them instead of cleaning every pane myself. I never forgot the people carrying buckets through the service entrance because I had once walked beside them. Whenever a new employee apologized for asking a question or worried about making a small mistake, I remembered the woman I used to be and quietly reminded them that doing honest work with care was already something worth respecting. Noah had grown taller over the past year, and every afternoon he still waited by our apartment window, not because he feared I would not come home anymore, but because greeting each other had become our favorite tradition. The difference was that now I arrived home while the sun was still shining. We cooked dinner together, practiced piano, and laughed over homework instead of rushing through another exhausted evening. One Saturday morning, Mr. Dalton called me into his office with another unexpected opportunity. "I am retiring next spring," he said. "The company needs someone who understands people as well as the work. I hope you will consider leading the entire operation." I looked through the office window toward the crews preparing their equipment below. Every truck, every ladder, every cloth reminded me where my journey had begun. I smiled and quietly accepted. That afternoon, I invited Vincent and Noah to the rooftop of the Riverside Financial Center after everyone else had gone home. The city stretched endlessly beneath a golden sunset, every glass tower reflecting warm light across the skyline. We stood together beside the very window I had cleaned on the evening we first crossed paths. Noah pressed both hands against the spotless glass and laughed. "You can see forever from up here." I smiled. Only because someone kept the window clean. Vincent looked toward the city before turning back to me. "No, Hannah, you taught us something much more important. You showed us that people who are overlooked are often the ones holding everything together." Noah reached into his backpack and carefully unfolded one last drawing. This time there were no buildings, no ladders, and no cleaning supplies. There was only the three of us standing together beneath a bright blue sky, holding hands in front of a small house with large windows. Above us he had written, "Home is where people see you." I could not stop the tears that filled my eyes. Vincent accepted the drawing as though it were the most valuable gift he had ever received, then carefully placed it inside the wooden picture frame Noah had built months earlier. "I think this belongs on my desk," he said softly. Noah smiled proudly. "Only if you visit our house too." Vincent looked at me, silently asking the same respectful question he had asked in countless different ways from the beginning. I stepped closer until only inches separated us. "I think our house would like that very much," I whispered. His hand gently found mine, warm and steady, never demanding, only inviting. I answered by slipping my fingers between his. As the last rays of sunlight poured through the perfectly polished glass, I leaned forward and kissed him softly. It was not a dramatic moment. It was quiet, patient, and filled with every ordinary day that had slowly brought us there. Noah laughed and wrapped his arms around both of us, turning our simple embrace into the family he had been drawing all along. Looking out across the glowing city, I finally understood that the greatest gift anyone had ever given me was not a better job, a safer harness, or a brighter future. It was the simple kindness of one man who looked through a clean window and chose to see the person standing behind it.